The issue of legal firearms, as you know, we've reached about 230 plus. We've had more murders so far for days of the 2023. That says quite a lot. Joining us is attorney at law, Nyree Alfonso. A pleasant good evening to you, Miss Alfonso.
Pleasant good evening to you and your listeners, Mikey.
Pleasure to have you. You wrote some time back that clearly we have a problem with legal firearms. We've heard sometime the Minister of National Security stating that over 100 legally issued firearms featured in serious issues gaining the attention of the police, including 4 murders. So what does that tell us?
Well, I mean, I do think I dispute that. That's the first position. I would very much like evidence of that to be trotted out to members of the public. And I've said, I have a feeling that what is being captured in that number of 100 over a very extended period of time. It's not just 1 or 2 years they're speaking of. It's speaking over a very lengthy period of time. I wonder if what has been included there is when legal firearm owners, which could include security guards who are FUEC holders, firearm user certificate owners, license holders, it may be that when they use their firearms and discharge their firearms in defense of themselves or others or property as well as FUL holders, that they are being captured in this 100.
But that's a bit, because you wrote the problem with legal guns, according to the Minister of National Security, Mr. Hyde, advises is the more liberal approach to the grant of firearms users licenses, which is the FULs you mentioned, by former Commissioner of Police Gary Griffith, and the fact that several persons have permission to own multiple firearms. Why is this an issue when the fact that we, the citizens, are under siege, we are soft targets, and we feel as though we're sitting ducks? Shouldn't the issue be dealt with as far as the illegal firearms?
Well, again, as I said, there's always, not always, in the last few years, there's been a spotlight turned on the holders of legal firearms. And it seems to me that it is always at a time where there's an uptick in crime, and crime in particular committed with firearms. Now, it's counterintuitive. I don't even see the relationship. What is the relationship between increased private firearm ownership and the uptick in crime? I mean, that is a nexus that I have not seen anybody even attempt to draw.
Yeah. But this liberal approach, I mean, using these words, of course, by the Minister of National Security, this liberal approach that he's referring to as if it seems as though there's no due process, due diligence, getting these things in the arms of people who qualify and meet the criteria. What is this liberal approach? I mean, when you look at it carefully, I mean, to me, that comes across as if it was just a process that here's my friend, here's someone I know, this one needs it. But yet still, there is a procedure and a process that one has to go through.
But, I mean, there's been I don't want to say it's more smoke and mirrors as far as I'm concerned by the Honorable Minister of National Security. One has to look at the very limited criteria that is, set out in the Firearms Act to understand what he is saying, is without merit. So if you have very limited criteria, you can keep the firearms safe. Your spouse has given you approval. Your eyesight is good. You're physically fit. And you meet the, you're going to very much meet the criteria. So when you talk about a liberal approach, so if 10,000 people meet the criteria, on what basis will you grant it to some of those 10,000 people and not grant it to some others? What is the basis of that? You must follow. I keep telling people, if you're going to live in a society governed by laws, that requires the lawmakers and the citizens to also follow the law. It's not, it's not mutually exclusive. One person is guided and the other person can do what they want. Yeah, So if you meet the criteria and you indicate your willingness, not everybody who meets the criteria will have a desire or the ability mentally to carry a firearm or even physically, right? So if if that is the criteria and you meet it, on what basis can you decide something is something is liberal, not liberal? You must follow the dictates of the Firearms Act.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's written. And to make a statement as to say, well, it's just apparently was given out to every Tom, Dick, and Harry. I mean, at the end of it all, you would want your citizens to have a fighting chance, some sort of chance against many of these individuals who are now, we're seeing a home invasion taking place here. I mean, it's becoming on a daily basis. People are getting in, they're abusing the children, violating the women. I mean, when you look at it, shouldn't the focus really and truly not be where it is right now? I mean, you're going around looking at licensed dealers. It even borderlines right on harassment.
Well, the fact is, I mean, the dealership where I have an ownership interest in is before the courts with respect to whatever audit that they said that they wanted to do late last year. Thankfully, what transpired in our audit does not meet I have to say, the terrible threshold that Mr. Thomas's own reached, thank God. But we had very much of the same treatment. And again, this is an all-out attack on two old dealers. So if you're saying there was a liberal approach on a particular commissioner of police, what does that have to do with people like our dealership, which has been in existence since 1997? Mr. Thomas has been around, I think, for about 20 years, or at least well in excess of 15 years. So these are not new people. These are people who have been there, government go, government come. So what is the issue? Now, I mean, at the end of the day, I've never served in the police force, thank God for Trinidad and Tobago, but I think people need to contextualize the so-called liberal approach. The contracted position of Gary Griffith when he came on seat, he would have met in excess of 50,000 applications, essentially in fallow. Right. That had not been entertained, that had not been reviewed, that had not been granted. Let's start from the beginning. That had not been granted. So that if a particular person comes on seat and takes to heart the terms of the Firearms Act, which requires the commissioner to exercise his discretion once applicants meet the criteria, you would definitely have an uptick in the grant of firearms, because it means you will be going from a particular commissioner whose name I will not call, who took the view that firearms were not to be given except by the handfuls to certain people, and that person was on seat for many years. So if one person comes in and sees 50,000 applications, what is he supposed to do with the 50,000 applications?
Yeah, but it seems a bit one-sided here, and here it is, you're asking the Minister of National Security to show proof of these crimes that were allegedly committed with legal firearms. But tell us how many people were able to wake up the next day and continue their life who are owners of legal firearms, who of course were approached by perpetrators or what have you. We're not hearing about that. How many people were able
to... Again, as I said, I theorize, because right. I do not have access to the statistics that the commissioner has in fact trotted out in a matter where my company is the claimant. I have no access, no way to verify those figures, but as I said, it's over quite a protracted period of time. And I could tell you I believe where some of those numbers are coming from. There are going to be guns from time to time which are going to be stolen from the licensed firearm owners. And I'm going to say in that number are police officers, Coast Guardsmen, prison officers, defense force officers, police officers, and normal civilians. So if 6 people put upon you armed to the teeth and you have your one handgun, one will presume most of us will give up that handgun. Right. So that if you're talking about those types of losses, which are legal firearms, which I say come across the board, not only in the civilian population, if you're saying that the criminal element is now going to, use this in some nefarious and hurtful crime, that is not true to say that 100 legal guns have been used, because now you're talking about a gun that has been illegally stolen and taken out of the custody of the license holder. and used for wrongful purposes. I have a feeling, and I say I have to rely on my feelings and my theory, because the commissioner has not condescended to tell us how those figures were calculated. And, you know, when I was a teenager, I read a book called Lying with Statistics.
Right.
Right? You know, I don't know if that's what it is. Right? So you need to tell us a lot more about those 100 persons or guns or, you know, that are allegedly being used in crimes, because I feel you will catch up a number of the scenarios we are discussing this evening.
Yeah, but not only that, added to the fact that in many of these news reports that we're hearing, it's alleged that many of the ammunition that is found on the scene of these crimes come from some national security agency. Now, how does that add up to the fact that legal holders of firearms, how do they come into such an equation?
Well, let's contextualize again. So the affidavit from which the information was gleaned in that article of Darren Mahor in the Newsday yesterday was filed in proceedings commenced by my company. And what we have said in that application is we wish to bring in ammunition for the purposes of training our licensed firearm holders, which include security guards.
Right.
And we also sell to other dealers. So we wholesale to other dealers and sporting clubs and so on, right? Shooting sporting clubs, right? And we have been told, we've essentially been not given the permission we have sought. So we've challenged it in court. However, in the interim, just about a week and a half ago, $12 million was given to the Defense Force to purchase, or approved for the Defense Force to purchase ammunition. But it is their ammunition that is turning up on crime scenes. There's no evidence that ammunition imported by my company, Firearms Training Institute, has in fact been used in any illegal way or found on any crime scene or anything of that nature. So if you're giving the Defense Force, whose ammunition is turning up because it is stamped with TTR, right? As the other ammunition, TTPS is also stamped. You are giving them ammunition, but you're denying legal, back to it again, legal firearm dealers who are supplying legal firearm owners and allowing them to train and hone their skills, which is very much needed. You're denying us. So, I mean, really, that's really a double standard.
Definitely. And again, don't want to take away from the fact that there's a very strenuous and comprehensive process as far as having your firearm license. I mean, and it's an erroneous sort of a burden, as you would put it, that people will have. So the question should be, why is it that you are not securing the citizens to begin with, so no one would have to entertain, or very few people would have to entertain that they need to get a legal firearm?
Well, the preference of any law-abiding, right-thinking firearm holder is we wish we didn't have the burden. It is a burden. It is a heavy responsibility. And if we didn't think it was something that we required, most of us would be happy to be kept safe and secure by our police service. But you know that's not happening now and hasn't been happening for a very long time. People don't feel secure, and we have every reason not to feel secure because of what is in the airwaves every day and on the newspapers and in social media. So if the police do not find themselves in a position to do their duty to protect and serve, then what would you have law-abiding citizens do? We are doing the best that we can do. Now, it is more than passing strange that the political directorate of the day will turn and focus their attention on those people, that group of people. It really seems quite odd.
Yeah, I agree with you on that point. But at the same time, looking at it, I mean, is this about getting a certain individual? Because it just doesn't add up. I think from every aspect that we look at it, and from citizens who are watching this and weighing in on it and saying, listen, these are not the people that we should have a problem with. This is not where the fear factor lies. What we're talking about here is individuals who have never had any formal training, who've never gone through the process, and what they're holding is not just your average firearm. We're talking about high-powered rifles as well. Because, I mean, it's quite clear that you can't, or myself or whoever it is that might meet the criteria, we can't simply apply for that. But it is in the hands of the criminals.
Well, whatever that was, that robbery, crime, murder, whatever it is that took place, I think that was in Santa Cruz, was it? Where several people came in with
that was Santa Cruz.
Weapons,
that's right.
And people were by the pool table and diving under the pool table and so on.
Yes.
What I saw there, that's like everybody else from I'm sure the CCTV footage in the bar. You can't get a license for that. Well, let's put it this way. Let's start from it's prohibited in the Firearms Act. And yet my politicians and my regional politicians came together recently and said, we'll ban those weapons. But those weapons are already banned in most of the territories that I looked at their legislation, Grenada, Barbados, and so on. Those type of firearms are already prohibited arms under their legislation. And if that is the case, when a minister comes out and says, we're going to ban that, and several people have come out to say that, we're going to ban that. Well, ban it in the hands of the bandits, and I will be highly impressed with the government's efforts.
Yeah, I agree with you. Much of the conversation doesn't seem to center around the issue itself that has us under siege. It's basically either about getting someone, and at the end of the day, I don't believe this should be used for any political mileage. We're talking about, first of all, many people who would not even consider owning a gun, but they have no choice. They cannot be sitting ducks. And if they meet the criteria and they're willing to go through the process, then so be it. That's that. But we need to get the guns that are actually causing the chaos and problems in our society.
And as I said, please tell me you're going to focus on that. Not the persons who have met the criteria, who are prepared to invest their money, their time, go and train, and who hope to be part of their own solution in the absence of a solution being presented by the TTPS and those who control them. So, as I said, you can't, I've seen a senior superintendent, I believe that's his rank, senior superintendent K, one of these TTPS media, whatever it is they call it, briefings, say that the issue in Trinidad is not crime. The issue is the media reporting of crime that is causing fear. And I told myself that this is astonishing. This really is killing the messenger. What is the message? The message is I'm reporting what is happening in the country, and you're telling me that it is the media who is driving the fear that is existing in every heart and every household. That is quite amazing.
Yeah, it doesn't add up. It really does. And I'm sure the viewers are saying the same thing. It doesn't add up because you mentioned, of course, that when he was incoming Commissioner of Police at that time, Gary Griffith, he consequently faced approximately over 20,000 applications. So what was he supposed to do?
50.
How many?
For sure, he said 50.
50,000.
For sure. And I remember, and I would believe the guy is correct because I remember he attended same thing that the current commissioner did, the Shagwana's Chamber of Commerce Forum, one breakfast meeting. And he indicated they were still waiting 2 boxes and they discovered 20,000 at the time. So that was within the first few days of his appointment, right? So I'm sure they went through, there were boxes at a certain time up to the ceiling in the firearms unit and under desks and on top of filing cabinets, all manner of things.
Yeah, so it's expected that he's to come into office, see these things pending, understand what's taking place, made an assessment of what's going on as far as crime in society, and just simply say, listen, I am not going to touch any of these applications, any of these files, and that's it. I mean, really?
Right, so Trinidad is a place damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? So the fact that there was this massive backlog, so even if Commissioner Griffith said, listen, I'm going to entertain applications and try to clear this backlog. Obviously, you've been dealing with larger figures, and I think we should listen to what Mr. Griffith has been saying. If you tell me I gave 5,000 guns, remember 2,500 were given to members of the protective services as private firearms.
Right.
That is Defense Force, Army, Police, Coast Guard, prisons. Right? Only now they have formalized an arrangement for the prison service and SSA and all manner of things, right?
I agree with you. So basically what we're saying, playing politics with numbers.
Statistics are being pelted like jacks across the table. It is unfortunate. You have an intelligent population. come and give your population, you know, a true analysis of what is going on. Because what is going on in this country, I think the last call of ammunition they made was 3,000 rounds in Diego Martin. Tell me what that has to do with legal firearm owners.
Yeah, you're right about that. Before you go, I do have Mr. Ferguson, Alan Ferguson, coming up later on the scrap iron issue. I don't know if you want to touch on that quickly, because I think the problem that they're having is it seems as though a lot of power has been bestowed upon the minister, and that in itself is a sort of a scary situation.
Well, I mean, I'll let Mr. Ferguson speak to it, but we have been trying to assist a very unique dealer who has a very unique business model based on recovering maritime wrecks. So his business his recovery of scrap metal stems out of that. And we've been trying to assist the gentleman with the application process. And I said, it's a good thing I'm an attorney practicing for more than 30 years, because I think I would have been insane had I not. It's quite a difficult process. It's a platform which I would think persons who are less schooled would have grave difficulty maneuvering the application process that is now attendant to the Scrap Metal Act. So that when Mr. Ferguson indicates that very little scrap metal was in fact exported over this period since they reopened the industry in February, it is because the application process was fraught with difficulty. And then just as people like myself finally crested the mountain of disaster of requirements, the legislation was again changed on Monday of last week, giving you another mountain or two to climb up, right? Another set of difficult documentation to maneuver your way through. So I can imagine a smaller dealer, and less school and not assisted by an attorney or somebody knowledgeable in the area, would find it very difficult to maneuver the online process.
Yeah, I think basically what we're witnessing here, Nyree, is a shifting of the goalposts every time, and that in itself may be just there to frustrate these dealers and say, listen, they're just going to hang it up and say, I've had enough. Basically, that's
well, I mean, and the fact of the matter is, I'm watching some scrap metal piles which have been in situ and unchanged for many months since last year. That gives me an impression that people are not moving quantities out.
Yeah.
Right? Because maybe they're having the same difficulty. I have no doubt that some applications have in fact been granted. But as I say, the whole process how it's been set up about leaving your scrap metal, people coming to inspect it, and then you have to. But I mean, remember, these people are shipping in vessels. A sea vessel is not a taxi. It's not a bus.
No, it's not going to stay there.
It's not going to stay there waiting for the inspector and people to come and look at it and people to come and see it loaded and do their transaction record and so on.
That's
right.
Right.
I really see a lot of difficulties, attendant to the new process. I'm not saying the process didn't have to improve, but I'm not sure we've hit the formula.
Yeah. Ms. Alfonso, thank you so much, Nyree, for your time. It's been a pleasure. And again, we'll be checking in with you periodically. Keep up the good work. All the best to you and your team.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
All the best.